Alisson Cambier was 15 years old and lived with her family in Unheard-of, Belgium, a small town considered very safe and peaceful. Some Belgians even say it is one of the best places to raise a family. Allison was described as a cheerful, polite girl who was very fond of sports. She was well known and loved in her neighborhood, as she offered her babysitting services to neighboring families who always praised her work. Despite her young age, it is said that the young woman was very responsible and wanted to work from an early age to earn her own money. On weekends, she usually went with her friends to go horse riding, which was her favorite sport. In the same neighborhood, just 2 houses away, lived a 24-year-old boy named Thierry Jaradin. According to sources, Thierry was a lonely boy, coming from a dysfunctional family. When he was little, his mother, an alcoholic, abandoned him and he was raised by his father, an extremely violent man. Later, like his mother, his father also abandoned him and he was raised by his grandmother, an elderly woman aged 84 at the time, who was the only family he had. Despite their 9-year age difference, Allison and Thierry were friends and used to exchange VHS movie tapes, and on some occasions, they even watched movies together. For Allison, this relationship between the two was just a friendship, but for Thierry, a young man described as lonely and needy, it was more than that. On November 9, 2001, around 8 p.m., Thierry called Allison at home and invited her to watch a movie, saying that he had new tapes to exchange. Allison asked her parents for permission to let her go to the boy's house, which they gave, as they had known Thierry for a long time and he always seemed like a good person. That night, around 8:45 p.m., Allison went to Thierry's house as they had agreed. Arriving there, the boy took her to the little room where his tapes were kept, but the real purpose of him having invited her that night was to declare himself and ask her to be his girlfriend. In Thierry's mind, Allison had been his girlfriend for some time, and that was the moment when he had the guts to make it official. However, when he declared himself to the girl, she rejected him, saying that she just wanted to be his friend. This caused him enormous frustration, as he believed that Allison liked him more than a friend. Thierry then walked to his room next door, put on a black robe, a white ghost mask, and picked up 2 40cm bladed weapons that were already separated. The costume he wore was based on the movie Scream, and he had already planned everything days before. Upon leaving the room, he ran to Allison, covered her mouth so she wouldn't scream, and landed about 30 blows against her. Allison died instantly. After taking the girl's life, Thierry took her body and placed it on top of his bed, holding a red rose in her hands. A few minutes later, he called his father and a friend to confess what he had done. Thierry told his friend that Allison wasn't scared or reacted, because as they had watched the Scream movies together, she thought it was a joke. Then, the boy left home to go to his friend's house and left a blue light flashing on the headboard of his bedroom, along with music, referring to a scene from the movie Scream. When Allison's parents noticed that she was taking too long to come home, they decided to go to Thierry's house. Upon arriving, they called the door for the girl several times. As there was no answer, they decided to enter and found their daughter already lifeless on top of the boy's bed. Allison's father called the emergency and begged for help, but the attendant said that since it was a crime, they would have to wait for the police to arrive and only then send an ambulance, since the criminals could still be around and pose a risk to the rescue team. Shortly afterwards, the police and the ambulance arrived at the scene, and while the police searched the area for Thierry, the paramedics tried to give Allison first aid, but unfortunately, there was nothing else to be done. Thierry was located and arrested at his friend's house a few hours later. In a search for his house, the police found several tapes of horror movies, a collection that would have opened a video store if he wanted. In addition, proof of purchases from 10 days ago for the costume and the knives he used to take Allison's life were also found. For the police, this indicated that the whole crime had been premeditated, something that was proven when the police found the boy's diary. In this diary, he wrote that if Allison refused to date him, he would put on the costume he bought and dispose of it. Still in the diary, Thierry wrote that dressing up, putting on the mask and everything, would prevent Allison from looking directly at his face, so she wouldn't associate what was happening to her with him. About that, one of the detectives involved in the case said that the boy had a split personality, because while he felt something for her, he also didn't hesitate to hurt her. Already in custody at the police department, Thierry confessed everything and described in detail what he had done with Allison, emphasizing that he had already planned everything days before. According to him, the rose he placed on the young woman's body was kept in case she accepted his dating request, but if she rejected, he would take her life, and that's what happened. Thierry also said that he would be unable to accept being abandoned again. The detectives who conducted interrogation of him said that when they saw the crime scene in the accounts that were in the boy's diary, they expected him to be someone extremely aggressive. However, they said that throughout the interrogation, Thierry was very polite, kind, and at times a little introverted. At no point did he deny the crime, and the entire time he cooperated with the police. On May 26, 2003, more than a year later, the trial of Thierry Jaradin began. The prosecution argued that the defendant was extremely cold and calculating. They also argued that Thierry had a perverse side, committing the crime inspired by a movie, and that there was a high chance he would do it again if he was free. The boy underwent a mental evaluation to find out if he had any disorders, but according to the psychiatrist who evaluated him, he was completely healthy and fully aware of his actions. Thierry's trial did not last long, and after deliberation by the jury, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the crime, the case gained great repercussions throughout Belgium and in some newspapers. It was speculated that Allison and Thierry had a secret romance without their parents knowing, and that after she tried to end the relationship, the boy didn't accept and took her life. These allegations made the young woman's family angry, as the media was selling a fantasy romance story just to profit from it. Thus, Allison's father looked for one of the most famous newspapers in the country and gave a statement saying that journalists were taking advantage of the tragedy and that his daughter was never romantically involved with the criminal. The media also sensationalized the crime and associated the fact with the Scream movie, meaning that the films influenced Thierry to do what he done. These articles gained so much strength that the possibility of the film being banned in the country was later considered. Because of all this, the crime committed by Thierry became known in Belgium as Scream. In 2015, 14 years after the crime, Thierry filed a parole request with the Brussels court. His lawyer claimed that he had never had any problems with the authorities or behavioral problems before the crime. The lawyer further claimed that he also had no criminal record and no history of psychiatric issues in the first place. Despite these allegations, the parole request was denied by the Brussels court. In the year 2020, he submitted a new parole request, but the process has not yet been reviewed. Thierry Jaradin is currently serving his sentence at the Itro prison. Well folks, that's it for today. Thanks for watching until the end. Best wishes, and I see you next time.